The Tiger Rising by Kate DiCamillo. Chapter 7. It turned out to be an extraordinary day in almost every possible way. It started with finding the tiger, and it ended with Sistine Bailey sitting down next to him on the bus on the way home from school. Her dress was torn and muddied. There was a scrape down her right arm, and her hair stuck out in 100 different directions. She sat down in the empty seat beside him and stared at him with her black eyes. "There isn't any place else to sit," she said to him. "This is the last empty seat." Rob shrugged. "It's not like I want to sit here," she said. "Okay," said Rob. He shrugged his shoulders again. He hoped that she wasn't going to thank him for saving her. "What's your name?" she demanded. "Rob Horton," he told her. "Well, let me tell you something, Rob Horton. You shouldn't run. That's what they want you to do. Run." Rob stared at her with his mouth open. She stared back. "I hate it here," she said, looking away from him, her voice even deeper than before. "This is a stupid hick town with stupid hick teachers. Nobody in the whole school even knows what the Sistine Chapel is." "I know," said Rob. "I know what the Sistine Chapel is." Immediately he regretted saying it. It was his policy not to say things, but it was a policy he was having a hard time maintaining around Sistine. "I bet," Sistine sneered at him. "I bet you know." "It's a picture of God making the world," he said. Sistine stared at him hard. She narrowed her small eyes until they almost disappeared. "It's in Italy," said Rob. "The pictures are painted on the ceiling. They're frescoes." It was as if a magician had cast a spell over him. He opened his mouth and the words fell out, one on top of the other, like gold coins. He couldn't stop talking. "I don't gotta go to school on account of my legs. I got a note that says so. Mr. Fellmer, he's the principal, he says the parents are worried that what I got is contagious. That means that the other kids could catch it." "I know what contagious means," Sistine said. She looked at his legs. And then she did something truly astounding. She closed her eyes and reached out her left hand and placed it on top of Rob's right leg. "Please let me catch it," she whispered. "You won't," said Rob, surprised at her hand, how small it was and how warm. It made him think for a minute of his mother's hand, tiny and soft. He stopped that thought. "It ain't contagious," he told her. "Please let me catch it," Sistine whispered again, ignoring him, keeping her hand on his leg. "Please let me catch it so I don't have to go to school." "It ain't a disease," said Rob. "It's just me." "Shut up," Sistine said. She sat up very straight. Her lips moved. The other kids shouted and screamed and laughed and called to each other, but the two of them sat apart from it all, as if their seat was an island in the sea of sweat and exhaust. Sistine opened her eyes. She took her hand away and rubbed it up and down both of her own legs. "You're crazy," Rob told her. "Where do you live?" Sistine asked, still rubbing her hand over her legs. "In the motel, in the Kentucky Star." "You live in a motel?" she said, looking up at him. "It ain't permanent," he told her. "It's just until we get back on our feet." Sistine stared at him. "I'll bring you your homework," she said. "I'll bring it to you at the motel." "I don't want my homework," he told her. "So?" said Sistine. By then, Norton and Billy Threemonger had spotted them sitting together, and they were moving in. Rob was relieved when the first thump came to the back of his head because it meant that he wouldn't have to talk to Sistine anymore. It meant that he wouldn't end up saying too much, telling her about important things like his mother or the tiger. He was glad almost that Norton and Billy were there to beat him into silence. Okay, time out. Look at what what uh, what Rob is doing here. Did you notice that says over here that as he opens his mouth, the words fall out one top of the other like gold coins. Rob can't stop talking, and this is a problem for Rob because do you remember that Rob's got this thing? What did he call it? The suitcase. The suitcase that he likes to keep shut because he is an expert at not talking about things and not thinking about things and not crying. And here comes Sistine, and he can't stop talking. What is this power that she has over him? And of course, another thing that seems really interesting is this part where she decides that she's going to try to catch what he thinks is his leg disease, so she doesn't have to go to school. So you can see that how desperate she is because she really thinks that he's got some sort of really terrible leg thing, something so bad, we don't even know what it is, but something so bad that parents and students talk about it and don't want to catch it. So he's being sent home and not going to school. So his legs got to look pretty bad, and she wants to give it to herself just so she doesn't go to school. What does that tell you about how much she hates school? Quite a bit. Time in. Chapter 8. His father read the note from the principal slowly, putting his big finger under the words as if they were bugs he was trying to keep still. When he was finally done, he laid the letter on the table and rubbed his eyes with his fingers and sighed. The rain beat a sad rhythm on the roof of the motel. That stuff ain't nothing anybody else can catch, his father said. I know it, Rob told him. I already told that to the principal once before. I called up there and told him that. Yes, sir, said Rob. His father sighed. He stopped rubbing his eyes and looked up at Rob. You want to stay home? He asked. Rob nodded. His father sighed again. Maybe I'll make an appointment, get one of them doctors to write down that what you got ain't catching. All right? Yes, sir, said Rob. But I won't do it for a few days. I'll give you some time off. That would be all right, said Rob. You got to fight them, you know. Them boys. I know you don't want to, but you got to fight them, else they won't ever leave you alone. Rob nodded. He saw Sistine twirling and punching and kicking, and the vision made him smile. In the meantime, you can help me out around here, his father said. Do some of the maintenance man work at the motel. Do some sweeping and cleaning for me. Beauchamp's running me ragged. There ain't enough hours in the day to do everything that man wants done. Now go on and hand me that medicine. His father slathered and slapped the fishy-smelling ointment on Rob's legs, and Rob concentrated on holding still. You think Beauchamp is the richest man in the world? He asked his father. No, his father said. He don't own but this one itty-bitty motel now, in the woods. He just likes to pretend he's rich is all. Why? I was just wondering, said Rob. He was thinking about the tiger pacing back and forth in the cage. He was certain that the tiger belonged to Beauchamp. And wouldn't you have to be the richest man in the world to own a tiger? Rob wanted desperately to go see the tiger again. But he was afraid that he had imagined the whole thing. He was afraid that the tiger might have disappeared with the morning mist. Can I go outside? Rob asked when his father was done. No, his father said. I don't want that medicine rained off you. It costs too much. Rob was relieved almost that he had to stay inside. What if he went looking for the tiger and he was not there? Rob's father cooked them macaroni and cheese for supper on the 2-burner hot plate they kept on the table next to the TV. He boiled the macaroni too long, and a lot of it stuck to the pan, so there weren't many noodles to go with the powdery cheese. Someday, he told Rob, you and me will have a house with a real stove, and I'll do some good cooking then. This is good, Rob lied. You eat all you want. I ain't that hungry, his father told him. After supper, his father fell asleep in the recliner with his head thrown back and his mouth open. He snored, and his feet, big with crooked toes, jerked and trembled. In between the snores, his stomach growled long and loud, as if he was the hungriest man in the world. Okay, time out again. Just look at that for a second. It just says here that Rob's father's stomach growled long and loud as if he was the hungriest man in the world. But then over here, when they were eating, Rob's father said, "You eat all you want. I ain't that hungry," his father told him. Why did Rob's father say that he wasn't that hungry when it clearly looks like he's really hungry? Why would he say something like that? Go on, you can tell me. Yep, probably. Tells you a little bit about their relationship, doesn't it? All right, let's keep on going. Time in. Rob sat on his bed and started to work on carving the tiger. He had a good piece of maple, and his knife was sharp, and in his mind he could see the tiger clearly. But something different came out of the wood. It wasn't a tiger at all. It was a person with a sharp nose and small eyes and skinny legs. It wasn't until he started working on the dress that Rob realized he was carving Sistine. He stopped for a minute and held the wood out in front of him and shook his head in wonder. It was just like his mother had always said. You can never tell what would come out of the wood. It did what it wanted, and you just follow. He stayed up late working on the carving, and when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed about the tiger. Only it wasn't in a cage. It was free and running through the woods, and there was something on its back, but Rob couldn't tell what it was. As the tiger got closer and closer, Rob saw that the thing was Sistine in her pink party dress. She was riding the tiger. In his dream, Rob waved to her, and she waved back at him, but she didn't stop. She and the tiger kept going, past Rob, deeper and deeper into the woods.